You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
So we're gardening in a valley, and the question is going to arise as to whether one neighbor can oblige the other neighbor to share in the cost of the fence. And this is going to be, by the way, the theme for the first few chapters of Bava Batra. The first few chapters. What are the mutual obligations of two neighbors on either side of a fence? And we learnt, by the way, that in general, in the valley, we don't have to put up fences. And if in general there's no obligation to put up fences, if there's no custom to put up fences, one neighbor can't oblige the other one to split the cost of the fence 50-50. Obviously, anybody can fence what they like in their own on their own property. But if there's no custom to put up fences, we can't put up a fence on the boundary and oblige the neighbor on the other side to share the cost. And let's just hold that in mind. In the valley, there's no obligation to put up a fence. And the Mishnah is now going to qualify this. So we're in the third Mishnah of the first chapter of Bava Batra. So we're going to qualify this with someone who surrounds his fellow on three sides. So one guy has got a small garden, and his neighbor has a massive plot which essentially encloses him in on three sides. And this guy with the big plot fences in the guy with the small plot. Gadar et harishona, bet hashniya vet hashlishit. He actually fences off the first and the second and the third sides. So this guy essentially fences off three sides of the little plot in the middle. And the Mishnah rules, Ein mechayaven oto. They don't oblige him. The general rule in the valley is we're not obliged to put up fences. So even if this fellow with the big plot fences on three sides of his neighbor's field, the guy in the middle isn't obliged to share in the cost. And Rabbi Yossi is the presumption must be that if he had completely surrounded his neighbor's plot, i.e. he'd fenced in on four sides, then the neighbor would be obliged to share in the cost. I guess with some sort of recognition that once his field is completely fenced in, it's safe from marauding animals. It's safe from other kind of intruders. He gets a benefit from a four-sided fence that he does not get from a fence only on three sides. That must be the implication of the Mishnah. And Rabbi Yossi is going to make this a little bit clearer. Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Yossi says, Im amad vegadar et harevi'it. If he rose or if he stood up and he built the fourth side. If he built the fourth side, it's not clear from the language of this Mishnah who is building the fourth side. Is it the guy with a little plot in the middle? Or is it the guy surrounding him on all four sides? We don't know. If he built the fourth side, megalgalin alav et hakol. They oblige him. Literally, megalgalim, they roll onto him. They roll onto him for everything, i.e., they roll onto him to pay half the cost of all four sides. And that is implied, actually, by the first half of the Mishnah. And so it's hard to see what Rabbi Yossi is saying. And I wanted to show you the Rambam, Maimonides. And Maimonides says as follows. When the Mishnah says, if he got up and built a fence on the fourth side, they oblige him. What this means is, it applies equally. Bein shehaya ha'ish ahu shehukaf migimel ruchot. It applied equally if the fencer of the fourth side, the guy who built the fence on the fourth side, was the big landowner who fenced off the first three directions, or if it was the person that was fenced in from three directions. Whichever person takes the initiative to, once either of these takes the initiative to fence the fourth side, at this point, according to Rabbi Yossi, both are obliged to share because they both seem to get benefit from this new fence. They both get benefit. So if either of the one takes the initiative and completes the fence, then they're both liable for half the cost. What about our courtyard? Let's just go back to the courtyard because before we went into the garden, we were into a courtyard with a partition down the middle. And we introduced, by the way, the idea that this partition was to protect privacy. It was to protect someone seeing from one part of the courtyard to the other if it was divided up into two private spaces. And we talked about this concept of hezek re'iyah, damage from seeing, i.e. damage from the invasion of privacy, which is a very, very modern concept now. And interesting to see it's foreshadowed in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah goes back to this courtyard and it rules. Potter, hatzer shenafal. So the wall of a courtyard falls down. This is the partition courtyard, or the partition in the middle of the courtyard. They oblige him to build it up to a height of 4 cubits. 4 amot, which is about, is just under 6 feet. Just under 6 feet. Interest, and of course, this is the height of our mechitza in shuls nowadays. The mechitza is really a 20th century invention, or at least the height. It's not mentioned in halachic literature before the 20th century, but I think Rabbi Moshe Feinstein rules it's about 6 feet. It's 4 amot. It's the same height. Let's just have a look at the Bartanura. Why 4 cubits? Why do we oblige him to build up to 4 cubits? This is sufficient for hezek re'iyah, damage from sight, i.e. invasion of privacy. 4 amot are essentially the height that we build up to stop someone looking over the other side, and that is the height required to protect privacy. So we're going to oblige him to build up to this height. And the Mishnah continues, and the text is not quite clear. In the Kaufman, we've got it's the wall is assumed to have fallen down unless he can bring proof that it hasn't fallen down. Seems a very odd reading, because why do we need to bring proof that something has fallen down? It must be obvious whether it's fallen down. And most printed texts, and by the way, the Gemara in the Bavli and the version of the Mishnah we have in the Yerushalmi, instead of shenafal, that it's fallen down, has shenatan, that he paid. In other words, the text in most printed editions of the Mishnah is, he is presumed to have paid, i.e. the neighbor is presumed to have paid. Unless someone brings proof that he has not paid. In other words, the basic assumption is that people do pay for this stuff. If you want to serve a judgment that someone hasn't paid, you need to provide witnesses to show essentially that you've asked him to pay and that he refused. From 4 cubits or higher, we don't oblige him. No one has to pay for a communal wall that is higher than 4 cubits, because privacy only requires 4 cubits. But I mean, let's just think. 4 cubits is about 2 meters, so it's not it's a comfortable height for seeing, but it's not sufficient to build a building. You want your building, I think, to be higher than 4 cubits. And the Mishnah continues. Samach lo kotel acher. He built a wall next to it. Now, the assumption here must be that this wall is higher than 4 cubits, and he built a higher wall next to it. Why does he want to do this? Well, let's keep going. Even if he didn't put a ceiling on it, he put another wall next to it, even if he didn't put a ceiling on it. What are we talking about here? I think the assumption is, the assumption in the Mishnah is absolutely that when he's got a wall in his courtyard and he builds a wall next to it, he's got the possibility of creating another building just by putting a ceiling over these 2 walls. And at that point, of course, he's getting a benefit from the additional height. And if he's getting a benefit from the additional height, he's resting his ceiling on it, even if he hasn't yet put the ceiling on it. As long as he's got the possibility of putting the ceiling on it, we're going to make him liable. Megalgalin alav es hakol. We're going to include him in everything. Just as in the case of the fencing in the field, we said, Megalgalin alav es hakol. We're going to include him in everything. We're going to roll everything onto him. And in this situation, he is presumed not to have paid until he brings proof that he has. In the first situation, the wall falling down, he's presumed to have paid. In the second situation, where he puts up a wall next to the communal wall with the possibility of creating another room, at that point, he's presumed not to have paid for half the cost of the communal wall unless he can actually bring proof that he really did make his contribution.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.